So I decided what was one of the things that was throwing me is I'm used to working with the black background, the white dots, and the white axes. And we switched over to the white background and that kind of gray. I kept looking at it as object lines, and that threw me. And even some of the practice ones, it threw me. So I picked a nice obnoxious green to be the axis, and that again is under the options, configuration options, configuration. Had to think about that for a second. Under the colors, and this actually works in two groups. Now let's see if I can remember from the last time I did this. Is we're looking for our XY axis, and yell if you see it go flying by because I know it's here somewhere. Let's see. All right. All right, there's the grid. Okay, thank you. And there's a separate one for that Z, which basically when you pick and it shows up over here and we accept it, then it adds it. And so I ended up with color 44. And I had to look a little bit for the tool origin. Tool origin, WCS origin, I'm sorry. No, that one came up in Burgundy. I got it's one of the ones that says origin. Not the entity. All right, I should go back and look for all the things that are green then, because the grid, and then it's I know I should have wrote it down. Not the tool origin, not the WCS origin, system origin. There we go. And so descriptive that you would instantly recognize that as being the up and down in Z. All right, so what that did for me then is when I rotate over and that line shows up, it's pretty obvious it's not one of my object lines. All right, so we'll point that one out. The control definition, the machine definition would not let me update the post in the demo version. So we're going to hold off on that. It's something I want to get to. So we will we'll revisit that when I can update the post, and then I will gather all of those items up and put them in a zip file. Make sure that you have access to it. All right, so let's take a look at tonight's project. And this is the wrench. They've changed this over to more of a bottle opener in the latest 2020 beginning tutorial. I still like this one. This geometry is a little complicated, and it's probably going to be the best challenge that we have for our kind of transition over to loading a DWG. The next file, DWG is available. The next file and assignment after that, I think I did the wireframes, the solids, and you could take your pick. And then when we're looking at this item, they kind of put the origin in the upper left, but all the dimensions are pretty much off of centers and off of lengths. So when we do the square, the circle, let's see what else do we have here for geometry. So the radius of 0.7, and then blending it into the arm. This is called out as aluminum, but I really wouldn't make a wrench out of aluminum. I mean, one-time use maybe. And especially with the thin cross sections, this would be a good one to put into SolidWorks and do a little simulation on how fast it will fracture through that thin cross section, where even without the stress riser of a 0.35 radius in the corner, I think it's still prone to fail. So we're going to do this with steel. I'm going to do it with steel. You want to do it with aluminum, pick your feeds and speeds based on aluminum. I'm okay with that, but I want to throw in the steel to the mix and be able to manage that. So one of the things that's not readily apparent is that we can treat this as a 1-inch square, and then to make 12 points, we rotate that square 3 times, 4 times, something like that. I got to do math now. All right, so we're gonna start with that one, and I'll put the origin at the center. Again, draw wherever is the most convenient, that makes the most sense to you. when it comes down to programming, then we'll change the orientation. I don't know of any vices that I would put a 1/4 inch piece of material in and open it 6 inches and hold it in this orientation. I would rather let it chatter on the narrow side instead of the thick side. So previous times I've done this with the intent of having a clamping, that universal tooling plate that we would clamp this down and find some method, either run the slot and make a fixture that had a couple holes in it that would center on the slot that we could bolt down, bolt in the center. But I want to present this one a little different, where if I was going to do the way they suggested, a 1/4 inch piece of material, 1/8 inch deep, and we were going to make soft jaws. And what would my soft jaws look like going through this process? All right, so it has some advantages, disadvantages with the depending on where we place the origin and move this around. So we'll just have to play that part by ear. It sounds good. I may end up drawing it and then moving the soft jaws to a different origin based on what we get. The idea is to have a separate toolpath group that will be able to, or a separate machine group that will manage that same program, or manage that in the same file. Okay, so let's go back to Alt-1, get back to the top, and I have a radius of 0.7. So I want to be in my wireframe, pick up a circle with a center point, and the radius we said was going to go to 0.7. If I lock, then I don't have to worry about locations, and we have those snaps to the origin, and that little star looking shape tells me that it is going to pick up that as the center. And then we can accept. We'll zoom out a little bit, or zoom in a little bit, and then I'm going to go right to the square. So I still think rectangle is one of those tools that they moved on me because I'm still chasing it. Rectangle, and this is going to be an anchor to center with a 1 inch width and a 1 inch height. And I want to lock those because, again, if I start moving them, they will move around. So let's see, that was 1 inch across the flats or 1 inch across the face. I better go check that out because that doesn't look right all of a sudden. So that should give me flats. Let's go ahead and pull it back up. So that's coming in. So I thought I put a radius in there. I guess we'll find out. All right, so let's see what this came out, because I was pushing buttons and I wasn't talking. I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing. So F4, we have 0.7 and 1.4. So let's check one of the lines. I think I know what I just did. Go back to 0.4, or 1 inch by 1 inch, half inch by half inch. So what is that 0.72? That says it's to the outside. Okay, what dimension am I missing then? 0.875 to the outside. Okay, as many times as I've done this. After we trim it. This is a correction for the geometry of the internal star shape. I made a small error with the rotation, so we're going to stay with 1 inch by 1 inch and anchor to center. And we'll go ahead and accept. And when you watch the video upcoming, put in 2 items to rotate rather than 3. So what happens, we're going to give this a 30-degree increment, and then the number, if I'd just gone up in the instances, is the original plus 2. In SolidWorks, it is a total for any kind of rotation or circular pattern. So I crossed over into my other programs and it caught up with me. All right, so when we're going to trim, I'll go ahead and bring this out so we can get a result. So we'll stay with the divide, and then I need to make sure that I'm picking the correct geometries. So we'll go around the outside first, and knock the points off, and then I'll go back to the interior. When you watch the full lecture, pay attention that when I'm going through this divide process, the geometry is leaving overlaps into some of the shapes. So those overlaps should have been a clue, and I didn't catch it. And so I'm going to go ahead and we'll do a vertical. Point will be 0.134 for a width of 268, starting at 0, and then overlap. And I'll accept that one. This time I'm just going to perform a mirror, and it will be across the y-axis. Accept. And then if I divide one more time, we'll get the geometry. Alright, so jumping ahead, when we go over to the machine, and I want to put in a contour, and we're going to set the chain. So the chain pop-up has changed. We have chain, we have partial on the selections, and you have the other items, but on the selections, the last selection, chaining similars, the undos, undo last, select the last, looking at the branches, and then start and end. These items, I believe, were embedded in the edit previously, so now you have access to them sooner. Alright, so this is what's supposed to happen. It finds its way all the way around. If I close this off, it should still find its way all the way around. So I'm going to kick out of that one more time. No, we won't keep the operation back into the wireframe. I'm just going to connect the points. Oh, this needs to be freeform. Make sure I get my endpoint there. Alright, so if I'm treating this as a closed pocket, then we'll be back over into the toolpaths, setting a contour, and then setting the direction. It says branch point reached. Select next, and then entity, and then there's only one chain geometry all the way around for the pocket. Well, let's go ahead and rotate it, and then we'll see what we get. All right, so I'm going to pre-select. So click, 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 and then we go into the transform, and under transform, I'm going to rotate. And we're going to copy, and the number to give us 12 points should be 3. And let's see, I'm not getting any preview there. So selection, I can see it. So defined, we are in rotate, angle between. Oh, I gave it an angle of 0. So is that going to go to 120 or 30? 60. Let's see, included. No, that doesn't look right. All right, so 30 degrees. All right, so still a little bit there. Let's see, that still doesn't come quite up to the flats. 3, 4, 5, triangle, 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 triangle. All right, making sure I got the visual on it because there's a lot of lines there that we're going to have to deal with. So we'll OK it. And then back over in the wireframe, we're going to trim 2 entities out of the group. Let's see, we're in 2020, so this went to auto. So trim extend. Trim entities, trim mini, trim to point. All right, let's try the trim mini because that's new terminology. So just going to start picking and hope for the best. All right, so in selection, and then the trimming curve. Nope, I really want that to remove. Okay, that obviously was not it. So another one of those. I should have pushed those buttons a little bit earlier. What just happened? Oh, we're back to the tools. All right, if I come back to trim 1, so just when I got used to divide and delete, they have shifted it. All right, I'm gonna pause. Okay, so where I was looking for that included into the trim entities, they broke it out. So yeah, if you're using the classroom computers with 2018, under the trim entities over on this side, you're going to see the divide delete over as a selection. And in 2020, it's going to shift up to the divide. So we still have a little bit of a learning curve. So when I start removing those, and then I do have to watch out for the ones that sneak out, but we can come back and get those after. So as I go through and make my selections, and we can remove those points. I'll do the outsides first because I'm already losing the perception. All right, and then let's see, that one will go away. And I believe, oh, they went 268 on that one, so we'll have to wait and see. All right, and then the interior becomes a little bit easier. And click, so one more. All right, so that's looking pretty good. Missed one there, missed one there. All right, I think I got it. All right, so the other item then will be to offset that line. All right, so if I go to a line segment, and let's see, we're doing freeform. Let's go vertical. I want to have a start point, so 268 divided by 2 will be 134. 134 comma 0. And then the endpoint just needs to extend past the line. And since we did a little bit with the extend before class, we'll come back and pick that one up. All right, so I'm going to accept it, and then specify the first minus 0.134, comma 0 to begin. Let's see if I got that in, and so I'll leave that one a little bit shy, and we'll go ahead and accept. All right, so when we go back into, I'm going to find it again, trim entities, and we had trim and break. So not seeing the extend there, so one of the, let's do trim one entity, and if I bring it out to the line, then trim and extend are in the same operation. So terminology didn't quite play out there. So then I come back to trim, and we pick the circle again, and it's going to pull the line back. So if you are shy of the line and you do trim, it extends it to the entity that's selected. And if you're long, then it'll trim it back to the entity that's selected. All right, so let's go ahead with another divide. One of the reasons I like divide is that I'm used to just picking, and I can go ahead and grab all those geometries, make them go away. All right, so I have something that I'm little more comfortable with than all of the star shape. Let's see, we need to get rid of some of these guys, so I think probably the window pick. And am I still... Well, it got rid of that one, but I'm not exactly in a command, so I'm not sure what it's doing. All I know is that I'm selecting, and I think I got out of the... No, it's still trimmed entities, so that'll be interesting. Am I making little gaps? Or are we actually deleting them? So there's still a wireframe there. There's still one there, so I got to get this to the point to where I'm selecting, but I'm not seeing a tooltip, so I'm not too worried about the geometry. So probably could have done all of that square and trimming before I drew the circle, and then I wouldn't have to go back and pick up these little tips. All right, I think that's got it. Let's see if we do a right click and delete entities just to make sure. All right, so when I right click and do the delete entities, anything that was selected that wasn't automatically trimmed or I thought was trim, or not exactly sure what I was selecting there, since I didn't have the tooltip on the screen. I believe that I was selecting all of those with the window picks. So seeing those little highlighted background, still little wireframe things there, that would be a good indication that it's going to leave them if I click out of it. All right, so hitting the delete button, right-clicking, hitting the delete button, make sure. And now I don't see any little triangles out on the outside. All right, so let's go back to the home. I can clear the colors, and then that would also see if I missed anything. All right, so we'll zoom out a little bit. All right, we have an overall of 6 inches on our material, and we're 875 past. So I think we'll probably do, they gave us 1/650, which would be 825. So if I go into the wireframe and I want to do a horizontal, well, we can just give it the length of 1.650, which is an odd number. And I want to make sure to lock that. And then the first endpoint would be our X position, 0.825 and comma 0.875. All right, so that gives me the geometry, and we'll accept the line endpoints. Okay, what did I miss there? Horizontal 1.65, 0.825, 0.875. Enter. Oh, and the second endpoint. Okay, all I had to do is click. I hit enter too soon. That's why we have to read all of those tooltips. All right, so vertical line 6 inches. And then when I pick, there's 2 possible choices. 0 length line, vertical, 60. Guess I should pay attention to. All right, I switched it over to vertical. 2 endpoints, and we're still in 180, so it didn't kick back. I didn't accept it. Well, that's annoying. All right, so I'm getting a little button happy here. We'll go again. All right, second endpoint, direction. Make sure to hit the checkbox. If you don't see it on the screen as a preview, I can't go on to the next command. I'm just, I'm basically messing it up. Now when I switch to vertical and we tell it 6, it's still showing 180 in the angle. So, but it switched over and now it's showing an angle of 270. When I go up above the line, it's showing an angle of 90. So you should be able to click and accept. And then endpoint, we come back over to the line again, above wherever it went, 90 degrees, and then below 270, and accept. And the last one, we'll just go back to freeform since I had so much fun with the vertical and the horizontal there. Length is still locked, so I need to unlock at that point, and then that's going to let me go pick the 2 endpoints. All right, so the purpose of doing all of that then was we're going to accept, and the bottom of the arc is at 500. So let's take a look at the drawing real quick. So we're 500 to that element. So I'd like to get to that position and at least have it as a visual reference. And then the other slot would be we're 250 from there. It's 250 wide. We have 5/16 on the radius, and one center is at that location, and the other center is just above it. So there's a few little assumptions made in there. If you zoom up on it, the 1/2 inch and the shift, let's see, to the center, because that doesn't look like it. All right. So since it's not exactly detailed, what I would call well, let's go ahead and translate. And this is going to be a copy. Entity to translate will be the bottom line. I can end the selection. We are copying, and the delta will be a y of 0.5. And then I'll see the preview for the line, the directions. And do I need to do another one of those? I really don't have the offset there yet, so we'll just go ahead and hit OK. All right. So one of the things we can do with the rectangle, and we'll see if it's still working that way. All right, making sure I'm picking the little down arrow is a rectangular shape. And under the shapes, we're going to tell it that it is an oblong, a single D, the double D, so basically truncated ends. And then do we want to go base point, which I think will include the overall length, or set it to centers. So we need to pick our object, and then the base point will be at the intersection, the midpoint of the line, and the origin will be at the bottom middle. Width of the shape, we have the first one with a radius of 0.125. So width would be 0.25. Got an extra decimal place in there, 0.25. I go ahead and lock it. Click return the graphics window and select a point. Well, we could draw a little more sketch geometry that way. I haven't seen that one before. And the height is 2.5. All right, and then notice that that's just coming down and touching right there at the line we constructed for that geometry. Okay, so anything else I need to build? I think I got it all. So let's go ahead and hit OK. OK and create new. All right, so we're going to see if we can do the same thing with the outside geometry, a radius of 0.3125. So that would give us a width of 0.625. And the height, let's see, 6 minus 0.875, and we're a little bit inside of that. Let's go like 5.5 inches, and we'll see what it looks like on the preview. So main thing is that I want it to, and we have the base point, so let's go 2 points for first corner. I don't think I want the corner. Corner doesn't instill a lot of confidence in me, so if we go from there to there, that's going to truncate it, and then if we said they're sharing the centers, then the 0.3125 would need to come off of that. So I think it's going to be better just to go ahead and draw the circles. I don't know that the odd brown is going to help me there, so I'm going to backtrack and go a different way. All right, so circle center point, they're sharing the circle. We're locked into the 0.7, so that one shifts over to the 0.3125 for the radius. We'll set it at the center. No, we'll set it at the bottom. That looks kind of hard to tell. All right, let's jump back over and double check. So a little bit more length, and it comes across at that point where it transitions. So I'm thinking the bottom of the arc, and then we build it back up. All right, and then we'll accept. Let's just do an Alt-1 to, we're in the normal. So right click and fit, that'll bring it back up to size. All right, so when I go back into the line, I'm going to make this a vertical. Length, since it's unlocked, I should be able to find that intersection and then drag it a little ways past the circle. I think that's a little easier. I don't know. We'll do one trim, one extend. Oh, and then make sure to accept. And then another vertical. Bring it up a little closer and accept. All right, so we're getting our geometry built out. We're a little bit closer. We keep adding in a little bit more. So my trim entities, I'm trimming and I'm just working on one entity. So this doesn't really apply to 2 entities, but depending on the selection, with the circle, probably not a good idea. We're going to lose more of the circle than it's worth. 3 entities, yeah, I could try to do all 3 of those at once. More complicated than I want to deal with. All right, so if I do the trim one entity and give it a trimming surface, I can't really do the circle yet because it's going to see this as a full around. I want to do the other trim, extend. Now I have something that if I really wanted to, I can trim to that point. But again, got kind of a not what I was expecting. So I'm just going to go ahead and accept, go back to my standby of divide, and I can make that item go away. All right, same thing down here. Let's right click and fit. And I'll zoom up a little bit. We're still in divide. So as I pick that geometry, then we can make that go away. And the construction line, since I'm through with it, if I thought I would need it again, I could put it on a separate layer and just hide it from the display. I'm just going to go ahead and hit delete on the keyboard with it selected, and then it goes away. All right, last pieces of geometry are the fillets. And we need to get back to fit. All right. So when we go to fillet the entities, then I have a radius of 0.25 as the default. So we'll pick and we'll pick, and then make sure to accept. And this I want to accept and continue, and OK. And then there is, I want to say that it is a relief, and only lines can be selected for this fillet style. The radius is 0.035. Okay, thought it highlighted 0.035. first line, and that's going to tangent. So enter an additional clearance distance to use, maximum allowable. All right, so that's saying it's gonna, relief is gonna come off tangent. There we go, we want the clearance. And a radius of 0.035, but it doesn't really give us a clearance. Usually, if this was going, if that was my sharp, and I was to draw a circle, I want just a partial, and let's just say, I will take a guess. The maximum allowable value equals 95% of the fillet radius. Distance is measured along the fillet radius from the intersection of the entities. When I've traditionally done this, it's been about 10 thousandths. So we'll start there and we'll go up. All right, so from the two, saw a little preview there. All right, so between the two, and it almost trimmed both of them. So what did I do? Yeah, I got the trim entity. Well, if that's the worst case and I have to go back and trim those, I'm okay with that. Main thing is that I'm not going the exact point, and we'd have to measure, draw something from endpoint to midpoint to get a length or get a distance. But if I had an actual 1-inch sharp square, I would still be able to fit it in here, line to line, of course, because we didn't actually set up much in the way of clearance for the rest of the geometry. But on this point, I would have 10 thousandths before the sharp gets into that radius. Okay, so we're going to, I don't think we need clearance on those guys, but we should on those. So all of the exteriors, that one did okay. Makes me wonder what's going on with those. Either that or it's the way that I'm selecting it. No, I'm going to say staying to the outside didn't help. Well, if the worst case is I have to go back and trim those out, I'm okay with that because I'm getting some pretty decent geometry out of it. So let's see, that made it all the way around. We'll go ahead and accept. And then if I divide, come back and pick those little tails that are left. Alright, so I think I've got those pretty well cleaned up. Alright, so I'll right click and fit. What have I missed? I think I've got all of the geometry in there now. We've got our shapes. So fun little project. There's some things you're going to have to think through, some problems. Gives you a real feel for the tools. Are there better tools to draw this with? Probably, yeah. Different ways. If you found a different way to create it, that's fine. Like I said, the next project, if you want to create another program, you want to use the DWG, that's fine. I would like you to draw this one, just because it is more of a challenge, makes you think through the tools. Okay, so I want to rotate this over. Let's get out of the divide delete, make sure I don't delete everything. All right, so window picking all of the geometry. I'm going to go back into the transform and I want to rotate, except this time I'm going to move. And we're going to go 90 degrees. And since it's not copying, then it will be just one item. All right, so I don't really have a preference for orientation. If you wanted the handle to go to the left, the handle could go to the left. So whichever one you pick. And then we're going to move to origin and picking the point. I'm not seeing, there it is. So if you don't see it, pick up that that plus or that snap. Then you want to make sure that you zoom in a little bit, get it a little bit closer, pick that geometry. All right, so this is going to put us into that quadrant 4, ready to machine. All right, so just as an example, if I wanted to include soft jaws, this is where I would go over to the levels, and I need to create a new level 10, so consider this optional. If you want to experiment with it, go through the process, that's fine, but before I get into the toolpaths, we're just going to kind of create this hopefully very quickly. I say that. So JAWS. And enter, and that is the current. So if I go back and let's see, how do I want to do that? Go back into the wireframe, and I'll set a line. We'll just go back freeform, and I should be able to go midpoint to midpoint, and that would be my split line. Now the JAWS needs something to collapse on, so we would have probably an 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch gap. Since this gap is 268, it might vibrate, but if this is pretty close, tight to the edge, I would not expect that to jump around too much. And pretty much on the backside, all we're doing is machining off all of that sacrificial material. So that being the case, then let's go ahead with a line. Actually, let's just do an offset. So on the transform, we'll come back over to an entity offset. And like I said, an 1/8 of an inch should be plenty. We'll offset it to the inside, accept and do it again. And accept and do it again. All right. So don't really have a preference. I just know that my soft jaw is going to be 6 inches wide. We were 1.625, so if I was making these, it would probably be around an inch. Doesn't have to be perfect. We're either going to go pull something from stock that, we took a bar and we blanked out all of our soft jaws, and we're just going to pick those items. So 1 inch should be plenty for the depth, and I'm going to make this vertical and pick up the endpoint. Oh, I didn't lock it. So let's make sure to lock it, and I'll get my direction and accept and accept and accept and accept. Okay, and then the next one, we'll just go back to freeform, and I'll connect the 2 endpoints. Or not. It sounded good. Oh, I'm locked into the 1 inch, thank you. Like, wait a minute, that's not getting out there too far. All right, so we have that. So one of the things, since we've done the trim and extend, let's go back to F4 real quick. And it gives me a distance, a direction, and a length. So in 2D, it's set to 1 inch. I'm going to tell it to go 6, whichever one it'll let me have. All right, and that has the same net effect. All right, so if I go to the visibility of the wrench and hide it, now all I'm looking at is my center line and the 2 soft jaws. So I need to get some geometry in there that I can actually use. So we're going to do the visibility, and I want to go back into transform, and we're going to translate. And I don't see a better way to do this. So translate. Oh, didn't let me have it. So my geometry will be those, that, and that. And in selection, and we're copying this, but it's not letting me copy from the level that they're on to the next level. So in that case, I'm going to have a little bit of an issue being able to pick those out. So I could, since I am copying it to a position, I could move it down and move it back after I change the level. Yeah, why don't we just do that? Because I was thinking I could change the other one to the object geometry and then move it back. But If I were just to move this down some set amount, minus 3 inches, that gets it far enough away. Oh, I didn't want to move it in Z. So watch the middle mouse wheel. I thought it was over in the work area trying to zoom out a little bit, and all of a sudden I'm seeing my Z move. And then we can go ahead and accept. And now I want that geometry. If I go back to F4 one more time, we also have the ability to switch the layers. And then accept it. So when I hide and make my wrench visible, almost got all of it. All right, so let's try one more time. Okay, everything's selected. F4. I think everything stayed that time. And there's another way to pick that. Let's see if we go to entities. No, that one's highlighted. Okay. I still don't think that did it. No. So I don't want to go through and do each of those at one time. Analyze entity properties. The other one is to pick the geometry. Okay, I think I got it. Nope. And like I said, I don't want to go through and do those one at a time, but if it's going to come down to that, so escape. Nope, that one sure didn't come over, so. All right, so I know there's a way to do that as a group, but now I'm a little flustered with it, so accept, and then go to the, all right, so I'm just hitting the number, hitting enter. Let's see if it propagates. No. No, we'll see if this is getting it. And enter. All right, one more time. Got my geometry. All right, so the long way of getting it done. All right, so I need to take all that geometry and move it back up 3 inches. So back into the transform. We want to translate, move, and its delta Z is going to go 3. Oh, not delta Z. Delta Y is going to go 3. And that puts it back on position. All right, so since I have all of those, let's see. Let's go ahead and see if we can group the colors. And from the home position, set from entity, set system default, and set all. So it probably would have been better just to go set all, huh? All I had to do was look for it. All right, so color, and then there is the level. That was what I was looking for. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it anyway. All right, so we need something that is visible but not interfering with too many others. So how about something in the nice lavender area? All right, so when I clear the colors, those go to something that's a little more visible. I'm not too worried about the center line. Let's see, this was a full circle, so if I were to trim it back to being a circle, that could go ahead and complete. So under the wireframe, we'll trim entities. I'll trim one entity, and we'll trim it back to geometry, and that should give me a chain. It didn't join them. So in that case, this is where we can actually use join. I got them close enough. Now if I join the entities, this one and this one, I want them to be a circle again. Accept it. Now it's one entity. So when I go to apply that chain, I'm not having to pick two separate entities. Right? I want it to see it as one. So the intent would be to have all of this. Let's go ahead and transform, move to origin, and now it's set up for 0, 0. So if I were to pick the back of the vice jaw and touch off in normal position, put a couple of parallels, that are not too tall, and then that would set up my 1/4 inch gap. Then I could machine out this shape, and with a little variation in the tolerance, putting in some compensation, get this tight enough that it would hold on to my steel wrench and keep it in that same position enough that we could machine off the backside. If we needed geometry, all right, we're going to do engraving, or we're going to add an additional pocket or something on this side of that wrench, I'm going to be able to do that because I have a known location. Now, as far as picking that location back up, I'm relying on these soft jaws. If these are aluminum and they're short run production, maybe we're running 100 parts, I can trust the aluminum to hold this piece. But after the 100 parts, I'm kind of expecting that aluminum to start to deform. Every time we close it, it's smushing it a little bit. And that accumulation of smush is going to come to a point to where it's not going to be as tight, or it's going to start to drift. All right, so at some point, if this is a full-on production, then we need a slightly harder set. Maybe not hardened, but if we were to make it as the same material, we wouldn't see that much deformation. All right, so with my soft jaws, I could set these up in another vise, bolt them in. I said put in the parallels, run a pocket, and I have a set of soft jaws to hold on to the material for the backside. All right, so we want to make that one current again, and the jaws can go into the background. And we need to get back to the tool paths. All right, so we have our stock, we have our origin. We're going to pick out the machine, and we'll just set for the default for now. Always going to go into the machine group, and I still like to go through the files just to make sure. Am I looking at the correct machine, the control? Am I looking at the same post? Is that, did anything change in that information? Tool libraries and whatnot, I'm not too worried about. I did want to move my tool library from as the default, or the one that picks up from the public location to where I could swap those a little easier without all that navigation. So let me do that real quick. So I have public documents as a quick access, but Windows 10 kind of changed it around a little bit to where you have to come down to the users, and under the users you will find your public, and then your public documents, and then your shared, and then we go to, what was I looking for again? The mill and the tool libraries, and I'm going to go ahead and grab both the inch and the millimeter and copy those back to just the My Mastercam 2020. All right, so this is the one I set up as the test for the tool manager, the external tool manager. This is the one we created for aluminum, but we haven't really built any speeds and feeds into it yet. So if I paste in that location, I should be able to swap back and forth, which is what I was trying to do in the video last week to kind of clean that up a little bit. All right, so we're going to switch back over, and then so I'm not ready to go to my aluminum tool library just yet, my TM library just yet. So we'll go back into the tool settings. I'm still looking. At one time, I could set all of these as defaults, and the program default number. Let's see, search tool library when entering a tool number, assign tools, warn of duplicate. And then I did find where we could turn these off so it wouldn't put sequence numbers, but I really don't like hundreds and by tens. And we said that we're going to go over to steel. So I'm going to use the mill library. And no. 1010 or 1030 is going to be close enough. 1018, 1020, hot rolled, cold rolled, going to be fine. So something that's in the family of tools, or of material, and then the stock setup. All right, so we've been doing the first couple. We did the math, and with this being 1.65 by 6 inches, then I could do the math and get the 0.825 and the 3 inches in, or 3 inches in X, minus 0.825 for the location. Still prefer that since we've drawn the stock, we have that geometry, that we just go ahead and select the corners. So when I select a corner, I can go from point to point, and it will do that math and do that calculation for me. So if you have your stock, draw it in, position the part within it, and that's going to go a little bit faster for you. Okay, so that gets our setup. I did not turn the display on, and apparently I didn't set a thickness, so I get to go back and do that. So we'll turn the display on. I like to stay in wireframe, again, the solid. We need to go back and either find that color and make sure it doesn't take over. And then my Z depth was the 0.25. And it's always going to, these numbers are always going to be positive. It's the stock origin that shifts it. So just for reference, in the case of routers where some of the wood routers we touch off on the base and all of our movements are positive, then I would actually shift this number up 0.25 so that it would raise it up, and the 0 would be the bottom of the part. Right? Don't do that on the mill. Don't do that unless you have a really good reason. Certain machines that have vacuum chucks, certain machines that you don't want to break into that base. If you see a negative value, you know that something's wrong, because you're going to break that suction. You're going to break that holding power. So that's one of the reasons we always did it on the router. All right, so going back to the front, I have my geometry. We're ready for a toolpath group, and I'm going to try this. Well, we'll do the slot first, and let's see. We said we're in steel, and that is 1/4 of an inch. So one of the downsides, mill toolpaths, and the slot needs to be a little oversized. So, or sorry, the tool needs to be smaller than the slot. Pocket drill contour. I was going to see if it was just. No, okay, we'll go into the control. We'll pick up our geometry. It's set to chain, going all the way around, and then we'll go ahead and accept. I want to jump right back into the chain geometry, check the direction. I am going to be climb milling to the interior of the slot, so I'm okay with that. And if I tell it that it is a slot mill, it's going to help a little bit with that geometry in setting up the operation. And I did not go into my tool library, so that tool is going to be a little bit big. So let's see, if we select the tool library, I don't have access to those numbers that we initially started with. So I'm going to kick out of that. I'm going to go ahead and accept that. Yes, I want to keep the operation. I'm going to come back to it and go into the tool manager. And so it picked up the 1/2 inch flat, but that's not really a tool that I want. So we're going to delete that tool. Yes, confirm. And now when I open up my tool library, well, I got to go find the other one. And we're going to pick up we'll stay with the TM. All right, so the contrast here is, if you've set up this library, then this is the process of going through and picking those items. So if this is preloaded into the machine and I'm using this library consistently, said it was for aluminum, it could just as easily be for steel. And we've set tools 1 through 7 or 6, and then if I edit the tool, I can finalize the property. That one can be tool 7 and finish. Now I have that entire group. I'm going to select all of those and send them to the top without my filter on, which is something that I do really well, is turn the filter on and then forget. All right, so and then I don't see any of those, and I do it again and again and again. All right, so now I can go back to the other tool libraries that have the monster list and say I've just grabbed Yes, we want to save to the current library, mainly since I made that change to Tool 7. And it's going to retain these numbers, so as I add additional, let's see, the 3/16 end mill, that's a lot of material to remove with a 3/16 end mill, so I'm not sure it's what I want to start with. I will probably go with a 4 flute 1/2 inch, and then for that slot, I could see doing a 3/16. So let's go ahead into the filter. We'll filter for our end mills. Okay, and then the filter is active. So we do have a 1/2 inch flat from that group, and we also have the 3/16. So I really didn't need to add anything. The only thing that really occurs is the definition, and since I didn't change the flutes anywhere, they're at 3 and 4. So I have what I need in my tool library. All right, so they're already set up. I just had to get the library over. All right, so double click on the parameters. That puts me back into the geometry. And we're going to go with the, let's see, the slot mill, the 3/16 tool. And we haven't set any RPMs for it, so 139 surface feet. Carbide 3/16 at 400 surface feet. That would be 2 times 8149. It's a little aggressive. And we'll back that off to 300 surface feet. I think it would probably a 3/16, and if I got a coating for it, I think I could manage the 61. All right, because aluminum, I would be looking at the an 800 surface feet, somewhere in there. All right, the feed rate at 36. Yeah, even though I think maybe it could handle that. Let's see what it is at 5 thousandths per flute. 12 inches still seems a little aggressive, but I'll break a tool finding out. And we're not really plunging, but being that it's steel, if it does happen to plunge, I don't want it to pull too much more than that. So we're going to slot first, and then I double clicked or accepted it too quick. Cut parameters, we're going to go with wear. Entry arc sweep at 180, overlap of 0. We don't have that much to leave on the walls, so if we're going to let it clean up, 4 or 5 thousandths is plenty, nothing to leave on the floor. And again, because I went into that chain geometry, verified the arrows, I don't have to do anything with the compensation direction, and 99% of our stuff is going to be for tip comp anyway. Rough and finish, we're doing a ramp entry at 3-degree angle. We'll take a look and see how aggressive that is. Step over a 0.03937. Let's go to like 30%, because it's really not going to take that much. If it makes 2 passes, I'd be surprised. And number of finishing passes 1, spacing of 50 thousandths. And the spring passes, being that it's steel, we'll see. So we'll let it take the full amount over. Depth cuts, it's going 1/8 of an inch. If it ramps in and it removes most of that material, we should be okay. Breakthrough amount, let's give it another 10 thousandths. All right, so it's going through, since we're going to be machining off the backside of with our sacrificial material. Then having that breakthrough is just, it's not going to be a little piece of steel foil, aluminum foil, whatever we call it, that little thin piece of metal that's going to be sharp as anything. All right, and then our retract plane, 1/4 of an inch, we're going to set to absolutes. And let's go, we'll stay with the 1 inch, 0.1 on the feed plane, top of stock is 0, and the depth is minus 0.125. All right, so if it takes it, we can apply that. Accept it. If it takes it, we'll regenerate the operation, because I started with the operation and then I got out of it, and tool operation failed. So that tells me that the tool going into the 1/4 inch is still a little bit, one of the parameters is holding it up there. So let's run back through, depth cuts, rough finish. So I think that spacing, let's go down to 5 thousandths on a finish pass and see if that takes care of it. All right, so anything that steps us off that wall and is going to make it to where the radius diameter of that tool can't fit into that slot, we've got to identify that and make sure that it has has enough room to build that entire travel. So that slot is pretty aggressive, especially since it's ramping in on one half of it and then it's going to be at full depth. And full depth, full width, at least on the first go around, probably just broke that tool. So let's go back to our roughing. We'll break it to, well, let's do half of that, 1.5 degrees. Regenerate. All right, so at least it's taking a couple of passes. We're going to see it as it ramps in, and then as it gets to the bottom, take that spring pass, step out, finish the slot. All right, so I'm going to try the trochoidal cuts with the 1/2-inch tool. Mill tools. We're going to go with 2D high speed. And let's see, I'm going to try the contour first, and we'll see what it builds up. The machine regions are going to be our outside shape for the starters, and branch point reached. It should have come all the way around. Let's go ahead and accept it. And then we don't have an avoidance containment. That might have been the containment. So, all right, so that's to the outside. Yeah, I think I wanted the geometry on that one. All right, so we know the 1/2-inch tool is not going to get in there. And it comes all the way around. I think I need to close that off. Okay, so I'm going to back out of those, exit out of it. Yes, we'll leave the operation. I'm going to go back into the wireframe and we'll create a line from the endpoints, just because I know that tool is not going to get in there, which means that I'll probably go back in the operation and open all of this up with the 3/16 in the same grouping, and then switch over to the 1/2-inch for the outside. All right, so the 2D high speed. We pick up the toolpath. I need to find the machining operations. We're going to chain complete, so it'll come all the way around. And then I don't want it to go inside. I want it to continue on the flat. And so my start and finish are at the same point. We go ahead and accept. I didn't check to see which way that arrow was going, but arrows to the outside. And that's going to make sure that we're cutting exterior. The tool, we already picked the 1/2-inch at, let's see what it looks like at 300 surface feet. That one could probably go up to as much as 3,200, but since we ran the other one at 300 surface feet, we'll stay consistent. And the feed per tooth can go to, let's go down to 1,000th. Well, I want to go a little bit further than that. Let's just bump it up to 8 and see what we get. All right, so again, some of these are just going to be take your best guess and then observe and react what you get at the machine. All right, cut parameters. Compensation direction is left. Tip comp is set to tip. Approach difference, distance. Let's give it 1/2 inch. First pass offset. Let's see, we're doing percentage. So percentage of the end mill, at least 25%, so that it overhangs. Step over of 1/8 of an inch should be doable. Minimum tool path radius at 50 thousandths. Sometimes we want to make that a little bit smaller, but that's a good starting point. Gap size, how much it will jump. And then let's see, motion, micro lift, if it has to feed across, stock to leave on walls. Let's go with 5 thousandths, nothing to leave on the floor. And then there's no contour. Radius of tool to shape, minimum tool path radius, and stock thickness. Should be able to take the full 1/8 of an inch. We'll let it make a finish pass. So one finish path with the spacing, we'll leave it at the 5,000ths. Feed rate, spindle. If we wanted to slow it down or speed it up for some reason, then we can override those values. And then the lead in, lead out, we're back to our standard numbers. So I'm going to give it entry and exit. And let's go with a 0.1 and a radius of I don't know, 50 thousandths, 45-degree sweep, and we'll transfer everything over. All right, breakthrough amount, we'll go back to 10 thousandths, and then the linking parameters. So retract to an inch. We're going to set to absolutes. And the depth, well, it added something in there because we got to minus 135. All right, so go ahead and accept, see what it gives. Let's see. Oh, I already had that one in there. So not a lot of material for it to remove, but it follows it all the way around, takes the step. So I was kind of expecting to see all those little nibble moves to remove, but at high speed, it's right there. There's not a lot of material, so even though that is not what I expected, it's not really that surprising either. It'll make the pass, come back. So it is pretty aggressive going through here, removing all of that material. But again, we can go back. If it takes it fine, it's only 1/8 of an inch deep. It's full width pass. We're not real aggressive on our feed rate. We'll see what we get. All right, so you can kind of play with those numbers. The other thing was in our standard. Our standard contour would be to look at the trochoidal cuts, which would do more of that, a lot of extra moves and could really elevate the feed rate. We just have to kind of play with those and adjust accordingly. All right, one more, and actually two more. We'll wrap up. So the inside shape, and actually that's going to be another sketch. So let's go ahead and turn off the display. So one of the things that that happens with our geometry, we'll go back to the top view. All right, so if I go to open this up as a pocket and it comes up to this level, we're going to end up with a little scallop right there at the end. I don't have geometry to overrun that edge. So we said we're going to use the 3/16 end mill. So line is going to be horizontal. I'm going to give it a length. We need at least the radius of the tool plus, so 100 thousandths, 110 thousandths ought to be able to get it. And we're going to lock that length in. And I guess I went the wrong way. Enter y-axis offset. Nope, I went the wrong way. I'll try that again. Length, horizontal, 0.1. Pick. Make sure to pick the right side. Accept. Pick the right side. Accept. Go back to freeform. And still at 100 thousandths. I like doing that. All right, so since I got ahead of myself there, we'll trim one entity to the second entity. All right, so now I have something that when this pocket, I can't get rid of this line because it's part of the other contour. If I needed to make it disappear, I would have to put it on a different level as my construction geometry or my toolpath, or part of that toolpath geometry. So since I want this to be part of the pocket, right now it's not that complicated. I can just kind of ignore it. And as I'm going through picking those geometries, I'll just pay attention to what I'm selecting. So mill toolpaths, we're going to try the, well, let's go with the dynamic mill. And the machine regions, we'll start at the outside and pick a branch to go that way. There shouldn't be another one there, I hope. Well, it found something there, so. All right. We might be able to come all the way around. Nope, it jumped to a second branch. So previous, let's see, undo. I want to unselect just one. Alright, so if that's the case, then let's see if we can go by segments. So as soon as it reverses, that's not good. Oh, and I don't think I went back and put my little radiuses in there, but they're not going to be a deal killer at this point. Nope, still not letting me do it. Doesn't like that one either. Okay, next segment. I don't see these as branches. It should be able to find its way all the way around, but as soon as that arrow reverses, it's telling me it doesn't want to go that way. So I got to make sure I'm picking on the lower right side. Maybe that's it. I was picking too far past the midpoint. All right, we got our selection. So as soon as we pick it, we got the machine regions. We're telling it to stay inside this time. I am going to go back and double check. I picked them all as separate chains. So that's not good. Well, we may have to pause that one and pick it up again. So the intent is to be able to machine all this out with the 3/16 and then go back with the rest machining with the 060 end mill and relieve the corners. So let me pause for just a second. All right, so I'm going to let's see, we'll make sure to shift and then we'll delete. So if that's the case, let's go with a partial. And we have geometry, go out that way. All right, will it jump? And it still sees that as a branch point, so it's trying to reverse on me. Nope. So it missed that one. Okay, so even though I don't want to do the partial all the way around, it's giving me a desired result. I'm seeing that yellow line go with it. But I would have expected the continuous to be able to find it. So, and this is where you'll get really good at using the middle mouse button to zoom in and zoom out. Find that geometry. All right, so if you're having to search for it, that would be the other thing, is if you are zoomed way out and it's making it very difficult to pick, don't hesitate to bring it up a little bit closer. All right, this is looking pretty good. I'm going to have to go back and see what I was telling it to do under the full one. All right, so made it all the way around. So that's the complete chain. That was the partial chain. It still picked them up. Okay, so we followed it through and I got one chain, but I had to select each of the entities. Still not sure why it wouldn't pick those up, and have to go see if I can find those a little better. All right, so we're staying inside. No extension, open chain extension to stock. So maybe I didn't have to close that out, but we haven't defined. Well, I guess it would find out to the stock, but it kind of coming off of that point. All right, so I'm gonna have to look at that one too. If we ignore the stock, I drew it in, so that does the same thing. If there were avoidance regions, so places like clamps or something holding this down, open air regions or air regions where it can overlap. So there again, that may be something that I wouldn't have had to draw that in, but visually I trust that and can be able to pick that up. Containment, stay within, and then the entry chain. Let's go ahead and see what we get. We'll go back to the 3/16 end mills. Those didn't look too bad except all those decimal places. We'll just bring that back to an even number. We haven't created any rest material yet. Our cut parameters will stay with climb. We don't need an offset. Step over of 040, 25%. about 20 thousandths on a toolpath radius. Stock to leave, let's stay with the 5 thousandths and nothing on the floor. Entry motion, helical radius, a little big for a 3/16 end mill, so maybe 100 thousandths, so a little over the radius, so it'll pivot. And Z clearance, plunge angle 2 degrees. I think we went 1.5 on the slot, so we'll keep that. And the clearance, how far above it will start. So basically that'll be good for 2 or 3 loops before it gets gauged into the material. So 30 thousandths above, and then we'll set the plunge angle, breakthrough of 10 thousandths again, and then our linking parameters, stay with 1, keep our absolutes for now, and then the minus 135. All right, so regenerate, nope. All right, so the step over mounts, helical in, make sure it cleans up the center. And then the whole thing with the dynamic clearance is that it takes those little nibbles rather than in a pocket plunging straight in. All right, so it's going to be a little gentler on the tool. We still have to account for that tool load, flushing the chips, the fact that it's steel. But that gets us a little bit closer. We could tighten up those step over amounts, reduce the engagement, and that would allow us to increase the feed. So you run a little bit faster. But again, it's still that balancing act of what's going to work best. All right, last one will be the contour, and let's see, select contour, and hopefully we have all of that last geometry, so I don't have to do that again. And the last says that whatever was picked for the last operation, pick it up again, and we're just going to let it run through. Now this is going to be one of those, see the tool. So I don't have a 16th end mill as part of my default, so select a library tool. We're going to go in and find a 1/16 flat. It adds it automatically as tool 8 because that's what we told it, find the next number in the sequence. So we've preserved our standard tool crib, added the next one that we need, and well, probably not going to make it to, yeah, oh, surface feet, no. I was actually trying to get it to 200, see what it, so 12,000. All right, so if we have a 10,000 RPM spindle, which we don't, we would bump that up and let it have a little bit of a feed rate. All right, so if I delete that out, and then we can get into the cut parameters. Contour type is rest machining or remachining. Right, so the all previous operations, or the previous operation, the previous operation left 5 thousandths on the wall. It also left all of those little radius corners at the 035, and so this should be able to get in there and clean those. So clearance of 031. Stock to leave, no. Remachining tolerance 3 thousandths. Don't really need to, since it is just relief, we can go back and look at wear, but that's going to be a lot of turn comp on, turn comp off. Lead in, lead out if it needs it. 062, size 90 degrees. We'll leave that for now. And the breakthrough amount, we'll keep our 10 thousandths, just help with deburr. Shouldn't need too many in the way of multi-passes, but we may revisit that one. Let's go ahead and make that 100 thousandths, and then the depth, minus 0.12. Well, they kept going to 3.5, so we'll go to 3.5. All right, so if it finds it, nope, didn't pick it up. All right, so what I was looking for was everywhere that it wasn't able to get in and clean that geometry. Well, maybe it did. Ah, it did. All right, so it's finding that geometry, but for a 16th end mill, it made it about that far and it broke. So if it's going to pick up, well, with the 5 thousandths on the wall, if it's going to pick up that geometry, then at the very least, let's set it up as a ramp if it's not going to go into those looking for the relief. So 1 degree, and let's see if it'll do that in enough steps. That still looks pretty aggressive for a 1/16 end mill. So we'll keep dividing it. All right, so a bunch of little passes, but again, that's having to go into the steel. 4 flute, even coated 16th end mill is gonna struggle a little bit. It's a couple of thousandths difference in the radius, so it's not having to come to a sharp, but it's still plunging in, coming out, removing that material on the outside. I don't know that I want that to be my complete finish. So that gets us a solution, but it probably needs to be refined. All right, so since this is running a little bit long, we'll finish it up there. Oh, I wanted to do the other machine group. All right, let's throw in the other machine group. So we would refine this. If we needed to deburr, we could use the chamfer tool, run around the outside. We still have the 1/8 inch of material on the bottom, and I can either create a new toolpath group and use the existing, or since I want to work just within the level for the jaws, I'll make that current and then turn that visibility off. All right, so that's stock. So with that machine group, I'm kind of stuck with this stock. I can't change the stock or move it, have it do something different. So if I want to define new stock or have different geometry, then we're going to set up a new machine group. So even though it's pretty much the exact same settings, we're going to right click and under groups, tell it it's a new machine group. Notice that we could switch it over and program for the lathe, the router, the wire EDM, and actually have it change types. Right, so same basic things that we've been doing, tool settings, program number 2, assign, we're using the same tool group, and then we'll go back to the 1 and the 1. I'm not going to worry about material this time. We'll go to display, I'll select my corners, and I didn't transfer over the stock. It's not quite that big. If we wanted to run the pocket, then it would be within that stock. If we just wanted to run the facing operation, that would overrun it a little bit. Or, oh, I didn't set my depth. Actually, for this, yeah, that'd be all right. All right, so now I have a new stock that I can work with. And if I wanted to face this, we said this was about 1 inch. So if I had a 3-inch, use my 3-inch facing mill, I can probably get away with just taking 1 pass. If I had the multi-flute and steel, so a 3-inch with 4, 5, 6 flutes, I should be able to buzz across that without ripping it out of the soft jaws too much. Depends on how aggressive we get. All right, so for this, then we go toolpath group to machine group 2, and let's just treat it as the facing operation. It's going to pick up the entire stock. The tool, we'll go back to the library. It picked up, so we got to go through that same process of adding the library. And not sure why it didn't grab. Well, since it's in that group anyway, if it'll let me have it, we'll just come back to my group, grab my 3-inch face mill, 1,000 or spindle speed of 1286. A little aggressive. Still a little aggressive. We might try 10 on that one. And we don't like to plunge face mills anyway. All right, so this went and added it as tool 1, but in reality it was what, tool 7, tool 8, one of the above. So since I didn't bring it over as a library, that would be something I'd have to go back and check. Cut parameters one way, cross and overlap. Really was just looking to make one pass. So for the width, it should be able to pick that up. Linking parameters, if we touch off on top of the part, we have an 1/8 inch of material that we're above, so let's stay with the 1 inch in the feed plane. If we're 1/8 of an inch, that gives us a little bit of clearance. I'm thinking maybe a little extra. And then the depth can go to minus 0.25. Depends on how we do that, or 125 is how we do that touch off. All right, so we have the toolpath, we have the extensions, and it will remove the material all the way across. All right, so you can do any combinations of machine groups. Just follow the logic of, do I want to just add another toolpath group because it can follow the same stock, and I'm just looking to have a separate separate sequence of events from this toolpath group, or do I need individual stock or have something completely different going on? All right, so we'll wrap that up, call that good.